So the instructions on all of these and on your homework is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be solve the equation by graphing. Well, we have graphed many different ways, and that's why I started with showing you all of the different ways we could graph at the very beginning. And I'm going to just stick that paper back up, right? X-intercepts by factoring. Axis of symmetry, either using the x-intercepts and finding the average or finding the axis of symmetry by the equation we have, right? The vertex, right? Using the axis of symmetry. The y-intercept as well as the x-intercepts. And then if all else fails, we'll start using points. So you can choose any way you want. The book isn't saying graph by a particular method. They're just saying graph. And so these are all the tools in your toolbox to use. Let's start with two solutions. X squared minus 4x equals 5. They're making it a little harder because they're forcing you to think through, wait a minute, it's not in standard form, right? It's not equal to 0. And so you know, because we've been doing this so much, that if you subtract 5 from here and from here, we're going to get 0 on this side. So let's go ahead and do that. X squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. That's my first step. Well, next I'm going to look at it and say, can I factor this? Well, let's see. I'm going to do what I always do. Set my parentheses equal to 0. What two factors multiply to equal -5? Well, fortunately, it's easy, right? -5 and +1. -1, +5. Those are my only two options. And I know they have to add up to -4 in the middle. So I know the bigger number has to be -5. So x minus 5, x plus 1. Well, the good news about this is easy to find my x-intercepts. So I get x equals 5, x equals -1. So right away, I have my x-intercepts. Next, looking at these should be pretty easy to find my axis of symmetry. I could do -b over 2a, but I could also average them. If I average them, and let me do this, let's see, on the side, not too big because I'm going to get crowded pretty fast. 5 plus -1 divided by 2. 5 plus -1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Right? So my axis of symmetry is going to be x equals 2. All right, what else can I look at and get from this equation? Well, if I have an axis of symmetry, I can plug that in and get my vertex, right? So let me say I'm going to find my vertex this time. And if I plug everything in to get my vertex, I'm going to get, and I'll just do this with you as we go through it, 2 squared is 4. So let's do it on the second one, sorry. 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 2 is 8. So 4 minus 8 is -4. -4 minus 5 is -9. So my vertex is going to be 2, -9. Let me make sure that's correct. I think so. Okay. So I have my vertex. And What else can I get from this equation? I could get my y-intercept. Well, looking here, my y-intercept is going to be -5. I think I now have enough information to make my graph, right? So I'll try to save some room on the bottom to do my graph. Let's see. I'm gonna see, count by twos just to save space. -2, -4, -6, -8, and I'm still running out of space all the way down here. Well, -9 is just going to be at the tip down here. All right, and I'm going to still make it 2, 4, 6, -2, -4, -6. All right, let me draw my parabola. Here are my intercepts, x equals 5, x equals -1. My axis of symmetry is going to be at 2. My vertex is at 2, -9. My y-intercept is at -5. And I can also find my last point, right? If this is -5, this is going to be around 4. And there I have the shape for my parabola. Pretty easy. All right, what does one solution look like? Let me draw a line in between. And because this is already getting kind of crazed, I'm going to draw it in a thin marker, an entirely different color. Try that again. Okay, so that was two solutions. What does one solution look like? Well, let me start with an equation. -x² plus 2x equals 1. Well, again, I am going to have to move this one over to set it equal to 0. So that's my first step. And my next step is going to be to factor, but before I factor all the way, I have to factor out a -1. So I have to add this little step. And to do that, I have to change all the signs inside, right? So if I factor out a -1, this -x² becomes positive. This positive 2x becomes negative, and then -1 becomes positive. Now I am ready to factor this and see if I can get my x-intercepts. And yes, I can. -1 times -1 makes me +1, and they also add up to -2, so that works. But this is what this would have looked like. I only have one solution, and that solution is x equals 1. So my x-intercept is x equals 1, right? All right. Well, let me use that but I can't, to find my axis of symmetry. Well, if this is, remember what we looked at before, my x-intercept, when it's one solution, if there's only one solution, it means it's also my vertex. That means my axis of symmetry is also x equals 1. It means my vertex is 1, 0, right? Because it has to be on the x-axis. And we know if you plug it in, you should get exactly that. 1 squared, -1 squared with a negative in front, right, is going to be -1, plus 2 times 1 is 2, +1 minus 1 is 0. So my vertex is going to be 1, 0. Well, here, that's great. The problem is all I have is a vertex. So what other information can I find out? Well, I could look at my y-intercept, and this time that y-intercept comes in super helpful because I know that's a -1. So now I have 2 points. I have a vertex and a y-intercept, and from there, I really going to have to graph to get the rest. All right, here's my x-intercept, my y-intercept, and I can see my parabola is going to point downward, which makes sense because this is negative right in front, right? As we looked at in 10.1. So, since this is my axis of symmetry, that x-intercept, y-intercept comes in really helpful because if this one is here, 1 over, right? This is at, let me put numbers on this. 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3, 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3. If this is at -1, sorry, marker problems. If this is at -1, 0, -1, I have symmetry right over here at 2, -1. And so I can find a second point. And that means I only have to find one more point in order to finish this graph. To finish that, I'll just pick the next obvious one. Maybe I'll pick -1. And then I'll also pick 3. And I bet you they'll give me the same value. Well, if I plug in -1, I have -1 squared, which is 1, so this -1, plus 2 times -1, so -1 plus -2 is -3, minus 1, I'll get -4. If I plug 3 in, 3 squared is 9, it's a -9, plus 2 times 3 is 6, -9 plus 6 is -3, minus 1 is -4. And that makes all the sense in the world because I went over one more to the left and to the right, and we ended up with they're both ending up at -4. And this is my upside down parabola. So that's what one solution looks like. What does no solution look like? Well, they gave us an example of something that really truly doesn't work. Unfortunately, because of that, it's going to be a quick one. X squared plus 7 equals 4x. Well, the first thing we need to do is, again, put it in proper standard form, right? This is not an ax squared plus bx plus c form, and we need to make it that way and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to take this -4x and move it over to this side, right? Subtract -4x from this end, subtract from this end, but I'm going to put it where it belongs, between the x squared and the 7. And now I'm going to sit there and look at it and see, can I factor this? And I could look at it a long time, but really it doesn't take that long to see that if the only possible factors -7 and 1, a -1, sorry, 7 and 1, a -1, and -7, there is no way those are going to add up to -4. So it looks like a no solution, but to be sure, I have to graph it. So I'm going to say no solution question mark because I can't prove it really unless I have the quadratic equation. So right now I have no x-intercepts. Can I find an axis of symmetry? Well, I'm going to have to do it the old way, right? So the axis of symmetry is going to be negative b over 2a. Well, negative b is negative 4. 2a is going to be 2 times 1. It's going to be 2. So my axis of symmetry is 2. My vertex, therefore, if I plug this into my equation, 2 squared minus 4 times 2 is 8. So 4 minus 8 is negative 4, plus 7 is positive 3. Let me just go through it again, make sure I didn't make a mistake. 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 2 is 8, negative 4, plus 7 is 3. Yes, that works. And do I have a y-intercept? I have a y-intercept. So I have a y-intercept of 7. Okay, well, I have enough information for sure to start this graph. And if you even look at the vertex, right away you can see, aha, that's why this thing isn't going to work as far as finding a solution. That's way above that x-axis. So, I'm going to make this 2, 4, 6, 8, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, 2, 4, 6. And I don't think I have to go into negative numbers. So I think I'm just going to do a negative 2 just to show that it's there, but I don't have to go any further down. Okay, so let's look at what this looks like. Axis of symmetry here. Vertex at 2 and 3. And y-intercept at 7. And if this one is over 2 from the axis of symmetry, I can pretty much bet this is going to be here. And I am running out of space, so I'm going to do that with 3 points. But it'd be pretty easy to plug in 5, right, and find out if I did 5 squared minus 4 times 5 is 20, right? I'd get 5. Plus 7 is 12, and so this is going to be going way up here and way up there. Okay, this ends lesson 10.3, part 1.